Again, I'm Dr. Doroski, and what I want to start out with for the day today, later on we'll have Dr. Burke talking about charting and some details about that, but I wanted to start this day out really kind of focusing on the beauty of our fertility and how when we can more clearly see this beauty and we can come to a deeper understanding of God and of ourselves. And I also think that when we do this, one of the things that we're also going to see is that's going to bear fruit is we're going to see an improvement in our relationships. We're going to see a benefit to our health. And some of the most awkward conversations in life are going to become a lot easier, maybe weirdly easier. All right, I've noticed this with some of my students. All right, so that's kind of what I kind of want to look at, how this can deepen our faith and some of the ways that we can actually thank our faith even for all the things that have been given to us, especially through our fertility. So I want to start off just with what our faith says about us and our body. And I think there's something really interesting here in the Catechism, paragraph 364. Here it says, the human body shares in the dignity of the image of God. And I want to reflect on that for a second because when I think of how we were created in the dignity and image of God, what I usually think about, the first thing that I go to is I say, well, one of the amazing things about God is that he's this being that's all-knowing and has this reason to him. So it must be that the dignity that we share with God is that we are creatures, unlike the other animals, that have this reason to us. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, but that's not what this particular part of the Catechism is saying. Our reason is this immaterial thing. It's not something really that inheres in our body itself. So right here, it's actually saying that our bodies share in the dignity, in the image of God. Like, what can that mean? How is it that our material being shares in the dignity of the image of God? What can that mean? I want to provide a suggestion and explore that a little bit. Another place where we can kind of see this connection to our faith and connection to God in our very bodies is in the Bible. It's a book some of you might have heard of, perhaps. All right. So in 1 Corinthians 3:16, it says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" So what do we see here? We see that we are made in the image of God, and we're even God's temple, and God's Spirit dwells in you. So when you think of a temple, what do you think? I mean, when I think of a temple, I think this is something that's holy. And this is something that's beautiful. And that's something I think that we should be thinking about our bodies. Our bodies are not just a thing. Our bodies are something that's holy and something that's beautiful. All right, there's a beauty that we get from being God's temple and being this image of God. So one thing I'll note about this is this is not an idea that a lot of people have about what the church says. A lot of people have this idea that, and I had this idea for a long time, that what we really are is we are these good souls that are trapped inside these kind of dirty, disgusting, kind of, maybe okay bodies. But that's not what the church teaches. It doesn't say that we are souls trapped inside of bodies. It says that we're a unity of body and soul, and that it's not just our soul that's good, our soul that was created by God that's good, but our bodies also came from God, and that's also good. Now, I still really haven't answered this question, why the human body shares in the dignity of the image of God. And what I want to suggest here, okay, so I haven't studied this a ton, but there's something that I really see here. And one thing that I see when I look at this is I think, all right, a lot of our different bodily systems, I see something really marvelous, something amazing to them. But one of the systems, the system that probably amazes me the most, though, is the reproductive system. I mean, like, you look at that system, and what does that system do? It makes things like this, all right? So I look at this, and I think, like, this came about from, this is actually my oldest daughter. She's 10 right now. She was not 10 in this picture. and I mean, this came about from the reproductive system of me and my wife. And think about this. What did we do with our reproductive? Okay, maybe you don't think that carefully, but what happened there? all right? So before, and this is true not just for my daughter, but this is true for all of us. Like, what happened when my daughter came into existence? What happened when you came into existence? Well, think about this. Before, when you came into existence, you changed the universe. And why did you do that? How is that? How can I say you changed it? You're like, compared to like the universe, I'm kind of small, Dr. Doroski. All right, so how did you change the universe? Well, think about this. Before you existed, before my daughter existed, there were a certain number of things that existed in all of creation. And then after you came into existence, after my daughter came into existence, there was something new that had never existed before, this new human soul. And that new human soul not only came into existence, but now it exists forever. So before you came into existence, there was a certain number of things in the universe. After you came into existence, there was a different number of things. You changed the universe forever. And you think about this, I mean, it's amazing that God does this. But the amazing thing to me, and I think one of the reasons why our bodies even share in the dignity of image of God is this creator. But then when we use our reproductive systems to make these little ones, God actually lets us be co-creators with him. I mean, at least when I think about that, that's a little scary almost. I mean, it's a big responsibility. And I remember, especially with my first child, I looked at this and I said, I can't believe that God gives anyone this like ability. I mean, I can't believe that God would trust anyone with children. I mean, this is an immortal soul. Like, this is going to be around forever. Like, shoot, I got to try to do a good job at this. I think that there's such a beauty, such an amazingness to the fact that our bodies even have the potential to do that type of thing. Another thing I want to note here is, so here I said, my beautiful girl. And I actually chose this picture on purpose because I think it's not the most beautiful picture of my baby. She's kind of lying, her mouth is open, like, ah. And, she's kind of staring in this weird way. But I got to tell you, like, when my first girl, when she was born, and then I held her and I looked in her little blueberry eyes. I mean, I just looked at this girl and I said, no matter how she looks, like, I look at her and I say, my goodness, this is just the most beautiful thing that there is. And why do I think that? Like, okay, so maybe some people look at this baby and maybe some people would say, it's not the most beautiful baby. It's okay, but not the most beautiful baby. But I look at my daughter and I say, wow, so beautiful. And why do I say that? I think part of it is because I'm her father. And I can't help but see that in my little girl. But then think about this. I'm her father and I see that beauty. God is the father of all of us. And I think that when God looks at every single one of us, he sees this beauty to us that he just can't even unsee. A beauty that we may not always see. All right, we might look at our own bodies and think, it's not as beautiful as it could be, but when God looks at us, he sees, oh my goodness, there's this amazing beauty to us, to who we are, to our bodies, to also our souls. So this is just something amazing that I see. Now, if this is correct, and if, just like it kind of says, just like it alludes to in Corinthians, if it's true that our bodies are holy, good and even holy, and even our fertility is holy, then this is something that even shares in the dignity of image of God, then I think one thing that means is that if we study this and understand it better, one of the things that we're doing is we're getting a deeper understanding of the mind of God and getting a deeper understanding of kind of what God is looking at in our lives and how he created us and what he created us for. So let's take a look at fertility and the reproductive system a little bit. So first also, let me put this in let me put this in this context. Let me put this in the context of a question. And if you've been in my embryology class or developmental anatomy, you've heard this question before, and a number of these things I'm going to say. But let me ask you this. So you don't have to answer. You don't have to raise your hand. Just think about this. how many digestive systems do you have? Think about that for a second. Not a trick question. So think, how many digestive systems do I have? Okay, hopefully you have a number in your mind. And if that number is 1, we are in agreement. Like our minds are like this, we're both thinking the same thing. Okay, yes, you have 1 digestive system, that's what I think. And why do we know you have 1 digestive system? Well, because there's this digestive system that what's it supposed to do? It's supposed to take food, break it up into little pieces, and then absorb the particles, the vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients from that into your body. And your digestive system does that. It does what it's supposed to do. So then let's ask this. How many cardiovascular systems do you have? Again, not a trick question. Think about that for a second. How many cardio systems do I have? Okay, hopefully you have a number. If that number is 1, again, our minds connected. It's like psychic, all right? And why would it be 1? Again, you have this cardiovascular system. It's supposed to take these nutrients, pump them throughout your body, and distribute them. And that's what your cardiovascular system does. It achieves its function. So now, here's the real question then. Ask yourself this. How many reproductive systems do you have? How many do you have? All right, so think about that for a second. Now, I hope you have a number. Now, the number that most people will actually say, what I hear a lot of the time is a lot of people will say half. I have like half of a reproductive system. And I actually think that that's pretty true. I actually think it's not quite correct. I think some people have more than half, and some people have less than half. All right, but I would say overall, you know, the main point is that each person does not have 1 reproductive system. You have less than 1 reproductive system. And out of all the systems of your body, that's the only one where that's true. Now, why do I say you have less than 1 reproductive system? That's because with your reproductive system alone, you can't reproduce. All right, you can sit here, your heart pumps, your muscles move. Try to reproduce, nope, didn't work. Did not work. You cannot reproduce on your own. What you actually have to do to reproduce is you actually have to kind of borrow another person's reproductive system of another kind. Now, I wouldn't say it like that, or you shouldn't be like, hey, could I borrow your reproductive system? I mean, there are like different ways to go about that. That would be better ways. But you know, kind of that's what you have to do. You actually have to borrow someone's reproductive system, and it has to be a different kind. And if you and you kind of think about this, what would happen if aliens came down and they only studied men or only studied women? What they'd say is, oh wow, cardiovascular system, makes sense. Does what it's supposed to do. Digestive system makes sense, does what it's supposed to do. Respiratory system makes sense, does what it's supposed to do. Reproductive system, what is this even doing? This is producing these cells that then die and do nothing. That's weird. All right, and it just wouldn't make sense. Your reproductive system doesn't even make sense in a certain way unless it's in the context of another. All right, and this is actually where we get the terms male and female. All right, so there's a lot of confusion today actually about what male and female is and what this means. And I could give a whole talk just on what male and female is. All right, but in short, male and female, if you look at this, humans they're male and female humans, they're male and female seahorses, they're male and female fish. And if you look at this, how do we know that? So the male and the seahorses, the male seahorse is the one that basically that carries the babies. That's the one that's pregnant. Now, how do we know that that's a male seahorse? Is it because it identified as a male? All right, do we go poll the male seahorses and say, what do you think you are? Do you think that like you kind of associate with male seahorses? Well, no, we don't do that. Seahorses are not very communicative, so it's hard to get what they're thinking. But what we see in all these different organisms, humans, seahorses, everything else, is that there are these 2 types of reproductive systems, and human males, seahorse males, fish males all have a male type of reproductive system, and human females, seahorse females, fish females all have a female type of reproductive system, and in all these cases you have to use both of them in order to achieve reproduction. And we can see this right from the beginning. So in Genesis, God kind of put this plan in action. When he created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. He actually put this creative ability not just in one person, but in pairs of people. So people actually have to work together almost actually, I think it's kind of interesting. It's almost, and I don't know, I mean, maybe you who are more theologically studied could tell me about this more, but it reminds me a lot of how the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, both. All right, there's kind of this coordination to create this, for this proceeding of this third person. And here we have these two people that also kind of share in this creative ability with God, which is amazing. So these two systems have to work together. And let me just give a little summary of how these two systems work together. Okay, so we've got a number of things up here. So right here we've got a sperm. That comes from a male. Over here we've got an ovary, and right here being released is what a lot of people call an egg. I often call it an oocyte. All right, but we'll just call it an egg for today. So for reproduction to happen, this sperm and this oocyte or this egg have to come together. But it's not that simple. There's a lot that has to happen for that to occur. And this is really crazy. So first thing that's going to happen, here's the womb. Here's the entrance to the female reproductive system. So when a man and a woman come together in conjugal union, what's going to happen? Sperm are going to enter this entrance to the female reproductive system. Now, this is a problem. And here's why. The entrance to the female reproductive system is very acidic right here. And acid kills sperm. So the male reproductive system has this problem. All the sperm are going to die. Well, it turns out that the male reproductive system doesn't just make sperm. It also makes things, it also kind of anticipates. It knows there's a female reproductive system out there, and it knows that it's designed for that. So it says, I need to protect these sperm. What am I going to do? Well, not only does it produce the sperm, it also produces an alkaline fluid. And alkaline neutralizes that acid and helps those sperm survive in this area. Now, that sounds great for the sperm, but you might, if you understand why that acid is there, you might think, well, this is actually a bad thing. Because why is that acid there? Well, it turns out that this area, so this is an entrance to the reproductive system, and if you look at different entrances to our body, what you find is that they always have this acidity associated with them. Whether it's your stomach, which is acidic, whether it's your urine, which is acidic, or whether it's the entrance here to the reproductive system, which is acidic. And why is that acidity there? That acidity is there because it kills microorganisms, kills things like bacteria and viruses. So now if some bacteria try to enter the female reproductive system and cause a problem, they're going to be killed by that acid. But what's happened here? The male reproductive system, in order to protect these sperm, have neutralized that acid. Jerk. All right, so you say, okay, this is a problem. And not only that, it's actually even a little bit worse. Because the male reproductive system also produces other immunosuppressant chemicals. And why is that? Well, again, it's trying to protect these sperm because the female body has an immune system. Your immune system attacks things that are foreign to it, and these sperm are foreign to her body. So the woman's body, to some extent, is going to try to kill the sperm. So the male's body says, let's try not to have these sperm be killed. Let's neutralize that acid, and let's suppress the immune system a little bit. So then you say, wow, this is really bad. But the thing is that the male reproductive system doesn't stop there. It's kind of like it's saying, let's not just protect the sperm and a potential little one that could come about, but let's protect the woman, her fertility, and this little one that could come about. Because also in that seminal fluid, there are also antibodies, all right, and immunoprotective chemicals that while the acid is going to kind of decrease the ability to fight things like bacteria, the antibodies that are also in that seminal fluid are going to then put that protection back in place. All right? So it's like this man's body is saying, I'm going to try to protect everyone here, or everyone involved, all the parts that are involved. Now that's not the end of the story though, because the sperm eventually move into this area. This is the womb. And when the sperm move there are also these other chemicals called prostaglandins in that seminal fluid. And these prostaglandins will actually be detected by the womb. So notice this. The male has these chemicals not actually even designed for the male reproductive system, these prostaglandins. They're actually designed for the female reproductive system. And the female reproductive system is actually designed to recognize those chemicals. And what do those prostaglandins do? Well, they cause contractions in this womb, and as a result of these contractions, the sperm can ride a wave of contractions of this womb up toward this area, the beginning of the fallopian tubes or uterine tubes. So now we've got the sperm, they've moved up all the way through the womb. And here's the thing about these sperm. The sperm will look like this, and this is what a mature sperm looks like. But these sperm, at this point, are not mature. So they look mature, but not mature. Just like there are some guys who look mature, but are not mature. These sperm look mature, but they are not mature at this point. All right? In fact, here's the weird thing. The sperm are in the female reproductive system, and they're still not mature. Their maturity is really, really delayed. They're never mature inside the male reproductive system. It turns out that the first time that the sperm become fully mature is here in the female reproductive system. They get to the beginning of these tubes, and it turns out that in these uterine tubes, it's like the woman's body knows there's sperm coming. Because in the woman's body, there are these sensors for those sperm that the sperm will then bind to. And it's like the sperm know that there are going to be these sensors there. So these two things work together. And that changes the head of the sperm so that now the sperm becomes fully mature and able to fertilize one of these eggs. So notice the sperm is never even fully mature until it gets to a certain point of the female reproductive system. These two things were designed, they work together, they're designed to work together. Okay, so we have this kind of working together of the male and female body. And one of the other things that I'll even note about this that I think is really interesting is that now if a child's conceived, all right, so let's say we have a child that's conceived, cells of that child now can become a part of the woman's body. We found these cells in places like the brain, the spinal cord, the liver, the kidneys. So where does the DNA from those cells come from? Well, it comes from the child, and the child got that DNA from its mom and its dad. So this means that when this woman is pregnant, she actually has these cells that have DNA that actually eventually came from her husband. I mean, talk about a one-flesh union. I mean, I just think that this is amazing. Now, if we look at this, okay, so we've got the reproductive system. We can also look at the fertility of the couple. So if we're looking at the fertility of the couple, we have to look at the fertility of the male, fertility of the female, all right? And look at it together. Now, if we look at the fertility of the male and the female together, what we see is that sometimes if they come together in conjugal union, it can result in a child, sometimes it won't. So in order to figure out when it will and when it won't, we have to study each type of fertility individually. We have to look at the male's fertility, the female's fertility. Well, the male's fertility is always on, so we're done. Finished, all right? This is how much time I spend on this in class, too. It's like, okay, male fertility is on, we're finished. We now understand male fertility for the most part at the basic level. All right, female fertility, on the other hand, it actually is sometimes on, sometimes off. And what we see in female fertility is we see a lot of changes that happen over the time of the fertility cycle. So the womb, the lining of the womb will get thicker and then thinner. There'll be changes in hormonal patterns. There'll be changes in development of the egg. The egg will kind of develop, be released, here's ovulation, and then go away. So we have all these different changes that are happening in this fertility cycle, all right, where we can see sometimes like when the egg is dead, then that's not a very fertile time. And we can actually figure out if we know when this ovulation happens, that's actually that plus a time a little bit before that, basically, that's the most fertile time when that could result in a pregnancy. And we can actually, and some of the things that we see here is that if we look at that time of ovulation, notice right here, so we're matching these up, estrogen rises before that ovulation and progesterone rises afterwards. So a couple things that actually happens is this estrogen, this progesterone, causes changes in what's called cervical mucus. So right here at the womb, at the bottom, there's this narrow part called the cervix. And the cervix makes cervical mucus. There are two types, E mucus, easy for sperm to move through, and G mucus, which is just ghastly for sperm penetration. So we've got E mucus and G mucus. Now, the E mucus is going to be present when it's easy for sperm to move through there, and it's going to be present during the times when the woman is most fertile, and this could actually lead to a baby. Whereas the G mucus is going to be present when there's no possibility of the baby. And why is this happening? Well, the G mucus, it blocks sperm. It actually blocks everything. So it also blocks things like bacteria or viruses. Now, in general, that's what you'd want to do. You'd want to protect say a little one that was conceived. You'd want to protect a woman's fertility and her body, so you generally have G mucus. But when it's possible for fertility to occur, what do we want? We want this window of E mucus, where now we allow sperm to possibly move through and fertilize the oocyte. So one thing I want to note here is notice how everything's kind of set up for fertility. I was talking to another professor about this one time, and what he told me, he said, if you look out in nature, one thing you'll notice is it's kind of like nature is trying to make new life. And it's kind of like if you look at our bodies themselves are trying to make new life. You know, they're trying to influence us even in those ways. And you can actually see some of this with the psychology of what happens at different times in the cycle. So there are these different types of fertile mucus. And this E mucus is produced in response to the rise of estrogens. And this G mucus is produced in response to the rise of progesterone. So we can actually tell some things. Not only can we understand some things about fertility, but we can actually tell some things about where a woman is in her fertility cycle and what her hormones are like if we understand what's happening with her cervical mucus. Now let's say we take this information, maybe we take other information like changes in temperature or monitor her hormones directly, and let's say we take that information and then write it down. Well, this is what's called charting. All right, this is an example of one type of charting, all right, and where we track the fertility cycle. And the most famous thing that this can be used for is for avoiding or achieving a pregnancy. So basically, if you look at this chart, I'm not going to give you details on this at all right now, but basically, the areas where there are babies, if the couple comes together in conjugal union, that could result in a baby. The areas where there are not babies, that could not result in a baby. So it's a very difficult, tricky code. All right, so basically, if we're trying to avoid a pregnancy, we say, okay, we're going to avoid conjugal union in this time with these baby stamps. If we're trying to achieve pregnancy, well, then we've recorded these fertility signs, and we're going to try to time conjugal union right in those time of those baby stamps. But this isn't the only thing that tracking the fertility cycle gets us. It doesn't just tell us how to achieve and avoid a pregnancy, and I think that if we just stop there, we just have too narrow of a vision of this. Because this can also help us to do things like detect health issues and detect hormonal disorders. So right here are two different charts. All right, this top chart, perfect textbook fertility cycle, comes straight out of textbook, in fact. So then at the bottom, this is a fertility cycle where something different is happening. Now, even if you're not trained in this, you might be able to spot there's a difference in the second set of charting than the first. So you can take a second, maybe you can figure this out. So if you figured out that there are no baby stamps here, you are correct. All right, that's the difference. And guess what? If there are no baby stamps, then it's going to be hard for this woman to have a baby. All right? So we can actually use this information about the fertility cycle, and we can take a woman who's charted and gets a chart like this and say, well, there's some kind of fertility issue. We can now diagnose that issue. And in fact, not only that, we can actually start to diagnose what are the particular hormones where there might be an issue. So let's take a look at this. Okay, let's take those same two charts, and I'm going to put the hormone patterns down below them. And this is what we see. So in this cycle, with the nice baby stamps, in black we have estrogen. And by the way, ovulation is happening right around this point right here. So right here you see these black bars rising before ovulation. That's estrogen rising before ovulation. This person with the great fertility cycle, you see her estrogen's rising just like it should be. And then in red we've got progesterone, which is rising after ovulation, just like it should be. And just by looking at this person's chart, we can make, if a person is trained in this and they know how to read this, especially a medical professional, they can tell, they can see, yeah, this person is very likely to have very nice hormones. This person, we can predict, they're probably going to have low estrogen levels and low progesterone levels. And then when we look at the hormones, that's exactly what we see. We see, oh, this person, yes, they have low estrogen and they have low progesterone. So notice, by looking at this, we can actually get information about the person's health and possibly their hormones. And there's a lot that we can do with this information. We can diagnose infertility, miscarriage, PMS, polycystic ovarian disease, endometriosis, hormonal disorders, and we can help with those things with this type of information. A couple that I'll mention, so miscarriage real quick. So miscarriage, a lot of times in order to even diagnose or even try to do anything for a miscarriage, a lot of doctors will say you have to have 3 before we can even say that you have a risk. So then what happens? You have to have 3 miscarriages before anyone will even think about trying anything. And usually after you have 3, I've seen this happen a number of times, or I've read about this and heard people relate this to me. They'll say, oh, you had 3? There's nothing we can do for you. Well, when we're charting, when we have this fertility awareness approach, we can actually see signs of a miscarriage before anyone ever becomes pregnant, and then try to treat them and help them before that occurs. All right? At least if we have somebody like, especially a doctor, who can look at these charts and knows what to look for. Let me give you some data on infertility in particular. So these are success rates in treating infertility. This is IVF's success rate, in vitro fertilization, the most famous way to treat infertility. And you see, if you have 100 couples that go and say, let's do IVF, 30 of them come out and they have a baby. 70 of them doesn't work. If you look at the kind of NFP or fertility awareness-based approaches, what you see is more like 60% success rate. All right, there's still room to be improved, but it's like double what IVF can do, way better than that. All right, if you look at IVF, so cumulative IVF, what that means is, what if a couple says, we're going to use IVF, we're going to pay $10,000, didn't work, another 10, another 10, another 10, and we're going to keep on trying. You can get up to about a 50% success rate. Still worse than the fertility awareness-based approaches. And a lot of this is probably because, well, one thing that happens when a woman is charting is that she starts to understand these things about her body, and the doctor can look at that and start to understand things about her body and about how her reproduction works. So it makes it a lot easier to diagnose what's the cause of this infertility. So when couples go in to a place that's based on fertility awareness, very few, like 1-2%, come out and there's no explanation for what is causing their infertility. When they go in for IVF, it's much higher. It's like 5, 10, something like that times higher. Somewhere around 12 or 13%, all right, will come out, and the doctor says, we have no idea what's causing your infertility. And you see a lot of other advantages too, all right? And I'm not going to go into these in detail, but we see a lower risk of multiples, of twins. So twins is a little dangerous for the mother and the children. Preeclampsia is this high blood pressure that develops during pregnancy that can lead to very dangerous seizures. Ectopic pregnancy, we also see that fertility awareness methods don't have risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which IVF causes, and they have lower cost. So if we're looking at treating infertility, what we see is really the best thing you could possibly do from a scientific standpoint is use a fertility awareness-based approach. All right, this is something that this gives to us. So, and I could go through a lot of other things, but the basic idea is that these fertility awareness approaches, one thing that just blows me away about them is just how good they are for understanding ourselves, understanding our health. But that's not the only benefit that they have. They're also beneficial in family life. So this is some data from a survey of the US population, and they asked women, how successful do you feel in family life? Completely successful, very successful, somewhat successful, et cetera, et cetera. And if we just focus on completely and very successful, you see there are these big gray bars here. That's people who are using fertility awareness. And if we add these two bars together, basically 75% of women who are using fertility awareness feel very or completely successful in family life, which to me is amazingly high. And it's especially amazingly high when you look at how true is this in the general population. So you look at the general population, and that's this kind of like a gridded bar right here, and you add these two bars together, and what do you get? You get 9, or actually it's this gray bar, sorry. And if you look at that, what do you get? 9% of the general population feels very or completely successful in their family life. So we see this great kind of feeling of success in family life, which seems to be a benefit of this. And if we look at this, we see other sociological benefits of people using fertility awareness. One, it seems to lower divorce, all right? And why is this happening? Why is it lowering divorce? Why is it making people feel more successful about family life? Well, I think one of the big reasons, and what a lot of people think, is that it's because it helps to promote conversations, all right? It can be really tough in family life and in marriage even, especially with kids, to really have time for different types of conversations. And with these fertility awareness methods, if you look at this, one thing that often happens is a lot of times when people teach people, they'll teach couples, and they don't teach them separately, they teach them together. So they'll teach, say, a husband and wife. And they'll say, okay, you're both going to learn about this, and the wife will kind of figure out what her sign's at, and then at the end of the night, the husband will record the symptoms. And there's this encouragement to kind of work together on this. So kind of built into the ethos of these systems, there's this discussion, this conversation that the couple has, which helps to improve the communication. And where is communication often the most difficult? In issues of sexuality. So now we're even encouraging conversations in that area. And now what's going to happen? Well, now, when the couple has to decide, are we going to have a baby? All right? Or let's say they're saying, you know, let's come together in conjugal union, and they say, wait a second, what would happen if we have a baby right now? Can we handle this? Are we going to just die if that happens? All right? Well, they actually will have a conversation that will be based on where are we in the fertility cycle? All right? And now they'll discuss this. And people actually report that when they use this fertility awareness, it makes those conversations about sexuality easier. In fact, I've seen this. I've seen a lot of men who study this fertility awareness with their wives. What they see is that not only does the wife say, wow, like, I can't believe this is going on inside of me, this is amazing, what's happening in my body, but the men, they say the same things. All right? They say, wow, like, this is amazing what is happening and what is happening in your body. And when people take my class, my embryology class, I see them saying a lot of the same things. I actually, so one time, I'll tell you this story. One time I was walking into my office, and then a student says, oh, hey, Dr. Doroski, and I didn't know who it was. I was like, oh, shoot, I teach like so many students, I forgot this person. But no, it wasn't someone I had. They were like, oh, I was like, were you in one of my classes? I was like, darn. And they're like, no, it's okay, Dr. Doroski. Actually, I'm going to be in your embryology class next semester. I'm like, oh, great, that's wonderful. She was like, I heard some great things about it. Oh, excellent. And yeah, I was hearing them from my boyfriend. And I was like, okay, great. And then she said something like, yeah, he's been telling me all about how great my cycle is. So I mean, like, I thought, oh, good. I'm going to keep I have some work to do, but that's great. Yeah. So I think it's really funny because I noticed this thing that happens when people take my class. One thing that happens is that this fertility actually gets put into a context. It gets put into this context, and because where it's easier to talk about it. Because I think the reason it's hard to talk about to a large extent is we don't really know what to think about our fertility. All right? If we look at the secular culture, that's kind of the dominant picture. And the secular culture kind of says, well, you know, your fertility, your sexual nature, you know, that's just a thing. It's not like super holy, it's not like super dirty, it's just a thing. All right? And then what happens if you know that like that isn't quite right? Then you see that the way that our culture is portraying the sexual nature of us, and you see that there's something bad about it. And then you start to say, well, maybe that means that sexuality and talking about it is bad. And then it makes it awkward to talk about it. But I'll say this, I don't think that that our sexuality or talking about it in a respectful way is bad. I think this is what's happening. I think that what's happening is that we're seeing that there's something good and even holy that is not being respected in that type of way. And let me illustrate it like this. Let's say that I took the Eucharistic cup that holds our Lord's precious blood, and I brought it home and used it for my orange juice or for some beer. Now, there'd be something wrong with that. And it wouldn't be wrong because there's something wrong with the cup or wrong with beer. These things are good, or with the cup, it's even holy. It would be because I'm taking something holy and treating it as if it's just a thing, as if it's just like any other object. And I think when people see that, they think that what they're seeing is that this thing is bad, but what they're seeing is that what's bad is we're defiling something holy by the way we're treating it in the general culture. So then when people are in my class, they start to get this context, and I talk to my students, and I often say, yeah, one thing that I found that's interesting about my class is people get oddly comfortable talking about reproductive things. All right? So if you've had someone talking to you about this, it's probably because they've been in my class and you're like, why are you so comfortable with this? All right, well, that's probably why. And I think that once you see this, though, once you have this context, you become more comfortable. And then the most awkward conversation that any parent can have, the one with his children about sexual issues, that becomes so much easier because now you have a context. I know people who are like, yeah, I'm excited to talk to my kids about this. I can really teach them. So we see all these benefits. We see health benefits. We see sociological benefits. We see benefits in relationships and communication. And the last thing I want to kind of close with here is we have the church to thank for this. Because where did all this come from? Well, it actually came from this guy, Pope Paul VI. All right, he was under a lot of pressure in 1968 to say the church's teaching against contraception is wrong. But he put out an encyclical Humanae Vitae which confirmed the church's teaching. He said, if you allow this contraception to occur and pervert the way that our bodies are made, then what are you going to see? Lowering of morality. We're going to see spousal infidelity, decreased respect for women, and abuse by the government. And what do you see with people who are faithful to the vision of Humanae Vitae? You don't see these things. He's created this pocket of people who got these special blessings that the rest of the culture that didn't listen to him are missing out on. But that's not all that he did. If you look at this, he actually encouraged the development of these fertility awareness methods and of their medical application. So at the end, in paragraph 24, he says, to men of science, it's desirable that medical science succeed in providing a secure basis for regulation of birth founded on observation of natural rhythms. So basically he said, so we didn't really have fertility awareness methods back with Pope Paul VI. He said, find a way to study fertility awareness methods and develop them. And that's why we have these methods. He said to doctors and medical personnel, let them persevere in promoting on every occasion the discovery of solutions inspired by faith and right reason. He said, and then once we have this science, let's use that and use that for medical applications. So he encouraged this. And multiple people who have developed these medical applications have said, he was part of my inspiration. So one example is Dr. Thomas Hildreth. He developed one of the fertility awareness methods, the Creighton method. He notes Pope Paul VI directly and how this kind of spurred him on to start studying fertility awareness and start developing medical applications to this. So I think we have this thing that's just really amazing, and we have the church to thank for this blessing. So let me wrap up. One last thing. What do we do from here? So if our bodies are good, our bodies are even holy, our fertility is even holy, then one thing I think we should be doing is we should be learning about it. All right? So I think that's why a lot of you are here. We're going to learn some things today. Maybe at some point, I know we even have some people here who teach Couple to Couple League, who teach Creighton. Maybe they'll even talk to you, and maybe you take further instruction from them and learn more. All right? When you learn these things, share them with people. All right? Say, I just learned this really interesting thing about my cycle. Want to talk about it? All right? So you say things like that. All right? I don't know. Maybe they'll say, I'm going to go this way. I don't know, but share things. Say like, I've really found these amazing things. And start sharing with these things with people and build and evangelize. All right, because I think if we share these things with people, well, these things are so good that when I look at this, I say, how is this not the medical standard today? Well, part of it is the inertia that we have and the culture that we have. But I really think that it's only a matter of time. 20, 40 years from now, this is going to be the medical standard, and everyone who grew up with it is going to look back at today and say, who were those idiots that didn't understand how their fertility worked and decided that they would break the way their fertility worked instead of working with it? And they're not going to understand what was happening today and why it's so hard, why this is not the dominant thing. All right, that's how I think that's how much it's going to take over eventually. But I think in order to do that, we need to build and evangelize. So I think some of the things we should be asking is, all right, once we learn this, how do we share this with our children? How do we share this is Sunday school a good place to share? Do we share this in, do we try to get this into Catholic schools? Do we then get it into public schools? All right, and there's some great programs out there if you ever do want to try to look into those types of things. There's a Teen Star program, has had great success. There's one by Rua Woods Press, that's Theology of the Body based, developed by an FUS alum, pretty good too, all right? If we could get these, start developing these, start getting them into more public schools, getting them into more Catholic schools, I think we'd change a lot. Because if all we do is we get our culture to look at their fertility and look at the sexual interactions in a healthy way, I just think that's going to solve a lot. Okay, that's it for me today. Thank you.